With Ms. Opavska, I came face to face with a real enigma. She's ice cold, no emotion whatsoever, just a heart of stone. This is clearly a woman that uses people for her own ends, very opportunistic. The epitome of Rastignac, only in a skirt. She fits that cliché of a femme fatale, beautiful, Slavic, and very sexual. This mysterious seductress is Katharina Opavska, a German woman of Slovak origin sentenced to 15 years in prison back in 2004. According to the French justice system, she ordered the murder of Alberto Boni, 63, her rich Italian lover. You could call Katharina the walking incarnation of a courtesan in search of wealth. With the financial support of Alberto Boni, she would jet set between Italy, Switzerland, and the French Riviera. But behind that pleasant smile lies a dangerous woman, a predator that crushes men like flies. And here she is today. For the first time since her release in February 2010, she's accepted to share her story. She's 56, her last 10 years have been spent in prison, and she decries this miscarriage of justice. You're innocent? Of course I'm innocent. It's the story of an elusive woman, the story of a murder trial with multiple plot twists, a scandalous drama that plays out like a mafia thriller. A story that could only happen here on the French Riviera, a place that has seen everything, including some of the most deadly encounters. Night had fallen, it was already dark. After that curve, that should be it. Although I can't say for sure. I'll stop. Yes, this is the place where my fiancé was murdered. It just tears my heart apart. It's really horrible what happened there. It's been 10 years since Katharina Opavska returned to the crime scene, a crime that landed her a long prison sentence. On the night of January 21st, 2000, her lover's charred body was found, here at the bottom of a ravine. He was 63-year-old Italian banker Alberto Boni. That night, Alberto was riding in his sports car on Route 50 heading to the village of Gorbio. Hours later, police found his vehicle flipped over, completely scorched, 17 meters down in the ravine. Antoine Giganti was the officer on duty that night. Nothing was recognizable. The body was completely charred. The skull was still intact, with the eye sockets and a mouth. It was really bad. An absolute nightmare. Then the investigation begins. Pierre Batti of the Criminal Brigade of Nice is handed the case. The car was pushed there, down into that hole, and was held down by that pine. We found traces of carbon in his lungs, meaning he was still breathing when the car was forced down there and burned. Investigators quickly dismissed the hypothesis of driving off the road. Just by chance, a man witnessed what happened and provided them with crucial testimony. It was a local gardener who was heading home. Shortly after 10 p.m., On this deserted country road, a Golf sped right past him, taking him by complete surprise. Several minutes later, at the turn of the corner, he finds the same vehicle stopped along the roadside. Right from his car, the gardener will witness an incredible scene. He sees a man go down off the roadside, who throws into the ravine what appears to be a Molotov cocktail. Then he walks back up and flees. The car and its two occupants disappear into the night, never to be found. But the police have another suspect, a woman the witness said he had seen a few minutes before the tragedy. As she passed by the witness' car, she turned her head. He was able to describe her: tall, slender, long hair. Opavska Katharina, Alberto's girlfriend, quickly becomes a prime suspect. She fits the description given by the gardener, this mysterious woman seen in the dark of night. And so the next day, they take her into custody. I could not express myself. I spoke softly. Then they began slamming the table. Speak up, speak up. Your boyfriend is dead, you abandoned him. I said, it's not me, it's not me. From Milan to Switzerland, the murder of Alberto Boni shakes up the cozy business world. Alberto was a respected man, a millionaire who rides in the most luxurious of cars and sports the nicest clothes from the best tailors of Italy. But above all, a self-made man who single-handedly conquers the upper echelons of finance and becomes quite powerful. There was a man who knew him very well. Anna, come give me a hand. My secretary is an idiot. Pino Mercurio, his art dealer friend and partner in crime. Alberto, paintings such as this one from one of the great Italian artists, Giorgio de Chirico, and he's world-renowned. I got him about 4 or 5 of these. Alberto and Pino, inseparable for the past 30-some years. Pino now offers us a rare window into his universe. You see there? His signature, Boni, because the picture was part of his private collection. A world where money opens all doors, from financial markets to contemporary art, to a world of infinite pleasure. I was always with him morning, noon, and night, whenever he was free. We went to prostitutes. What more do you want? Separated from his wife, but not officially divorced, Alberto savors the swinging single life and multiplies his conquests, lasting anywhere from an evening to a week to several months. It was he who led me down the wrong path. He was the one who had 10 women and me not even one. His family thought I was leading him down a path to destruction. It was quite the opposite. He was the one forking out the money. I just kept him company. In 1997, Alberto introduces his friend to his latest conquest, Katharina. Pino, his trusty accomplice, pays little attention. He believes that this relationship will be short-lived, just like all the others. Yet this time something changes. The banker falls head over heels for someone. Here's a picture of us in Italy, right by the sea. Very nice memory. A completely different life from the one I had before. For his family and friends, it's a real surprise, because he would always be changing girlfriends. Then all of a sudden he said it. I found the woman of my life. I want to stay with her. There was no reason for these two to ever meet, other than their desire to succeed. He was a finance tycoon, a macho, and a bon vivant at the height of his success. She was a beauty from Eastern Europe who won her freedom at a very high cost. She was born in the era of communist Czechoslovakia. At 19, she cut off all contact with her family and friends to reinvent a better life in the West. First in Germany, then in France along the French Riviera. With Alberto, she found her El Dorado and a new life. I fell for a gentleman who was in love with me. The energy was all positive between us. We had wonderful times together. Here is one of the most beautiful streets of Milan. And over there, that's where Alberto lived. Come this way. Where there's lots of greenery, that's the apartment. It took up the whole floor. And you know what? Come and see. He had a private multi-level garage. There he had a Porsche, a Ferrari, and an Aston Martin. In the early days of their relationship, Katharina moves in with him, and he gives her her own room, one among many rooms, one for him, one for the maid, one for the butler. With the full knowledge of his family and friends, Alberto has his mistress move in with him, in a home full of servants and paintings by masters. Katharina is now part of his life, and on her way to becoming Mrs. Katharina Boni. He introduced me to everyone as his fiancée, and when we were on holiday he would call me his wife. It was a great compliment to me, especially since it came from a man who loved me, a man that I loved. We were made for each other. During the 2 years that follow, Katharina leads the high life between Switzerland and Milan, but she still prefers the French Riviera. And as she does not work, she spends all her time in Monaco, in the gym and the spa, among the stars, attending fashion shows and social gatherings. And she travels halfway around the world. Alberto is crazy about her. He does not refuse her anything. In 1999, he buys her this villa and puts it in her name, in Roquebrune Cap Martin, just a few kilometers from that small mountain road where he will be assassinated just 2 years later. On January 22, 2000, the day after the tragedy, the police came right to the villa to announce the death of Alberto Boni to Katharina Opavska, and the least we can say is that they never expected this kind of reaction. She does not appear to be moved by what happened. On the contrary, she seems very sure of herself. She is a master of her emotions. It comes off as very strange. We're quite used to dealing with bereaved families, especially women. But nothing could have prepared us for this. The police questioned her on her whereabouts the day before. Katharina said Alberto came to Milan in the evening to spend the weekend with her. Right after arriving, he went right back out. Katharina claims to have stayed home waiting for him, but she never heard back from him. This version does not stick for investigators, for they found at the crime scene an overwhelming piece of evidence. We found Katharina's hat that was found right at the first pine tree. So that was a determining factor, since from then on she could no longer deny being at the crime scene. We found her hat right at the scene. We pressed on with the questions, and at one point she actually trips herself up and it completely knocks her off balance. And that's when she says, "I'll tell you the truth. Last night I was with Mr. Boni in the mountain. I went with him." Katharina said, Alberto asked me to accompany him. He had an appointment with 2 men who wanted to launder money and hide it in some tax haven. But after 20 minutes, things escalate. The passenger gets out of the car, he hits Katharina in the face, knocking off her cap. The young woman is in shock. These 2 men frightened me. They intimidated me. I was completely intimidated and very scared. I looked at Alberto, and he calmed me down. He told me, "Go back home and wait for me there." And it was the last time I ever saw Alberto. And if I had known, I would have warned someone, but I did not know how to react in this situation. But the police do not buy her version of the story, a mafia deal gone wrong. This made-up story that he would meet with two people on a backcountry road in some second-rate car doesn't hold water. It's inconsistent with Mr. Boney, who was a certified banker who handled large sums of money. If he had a business appointment, he would have met at a luxury hotel. Then there was Katharina's bizarre behavior back at the villa. She does not seem to worry about the fate of Alberto Boney, left alone in the mountains with two violent men. For this woman, it doesn't get any more urgent than this, and the thought of not calling the police, not calling Alberto Boney, when they both have a mobile phone on them. She didn't do anything. She claims that her battery was dead. Frankly, it doesn't add up. The person that you love is in danger. You should help him. Do something. Hail people down to neighbors. None of this holds water. According to the autopsy report, Alberto Boney at the time of death was semi-conscious. The police officers believe Katharina drugged her lover, then took him into the mountains. There, two accomplices sprayed the car with gas and pushed it into the ravine before setting it on fire with a Molotov cocktail. A plan that should have remained secret, if it weren't for a local gardener who unwittingly witnessed the whole thing. The police officers believe Katharina killed for money, for a life insurance policy that lists her as one of the beneficiaries. Just a classic case of a predator who kills her lover to steal his fortune. The investigation is wrapped up very quickly. Katharina was a predator, and she had found her prey. She was a femme fatale that found her rich, older man who lavished her in gifts, and her goal was to get his money. Why would I kill the man who's been good to me? Money? There would be no reason to do it for money. I never withdrew any money, I never got anything, I never tried to flee. I have no alibi. And there's nothing that links me to the killers. This is absurd. There was never an investigation. There was a truth accepted, even decided by the police. And it was decided that she was guilty, and on that they would not budge. 11 years after the tragedy, Katharina still proclaims her innocence. This is not a cold woman without any emotion who was just after money from her rich lover. She still boasts of the true love they shared together. When she meets with us in April 2011, she is eager to show us her future plans with Alberto. I think it's here. This is the house that we wanted to buy and move here full-time. It was supposed to be their happy home, the house of their dreams. The plans were all ready. She and Alberto would spend the rest of their lives together. This happy home, however, will wind up being used as evidence against her. Incarcerated in 2000, Katharina is reviewed by an expert psychiatrist, and the psychologist asks her to draw a house, this now infamous happy home. The result is puzzling. Here's what she draws. She explains to me that this is the house that they wanted to buy together. But in fact, it was Boney who would pay for everything. He had already paid 2 installments. She marks them spontaneously, the 2 payments that he made, 160,000 and 100,000. It was the first time I saw that in 25 years of practice. She wants to receive gifts, money, nice cars, wonderful trips, the pearl necklace, the house. She entitles herself to very luxurious gifts. And it's likely that she was stringing Mr. Boney along with her feminine charm, making him hope that in return for gifts, she will offer him sexual favors. This is a woman who uses her charm to get what she wants from men. During the investigation, this is the portrait that will be painted of Katharina Opavska. But does that alone make her a murderer? The investigation never linked her directly to the murder. So everything will be riding on her trial at the court of Versailles criminal court, a trial that will focus on her complex, enigmatic personality.
Si on devait raconter une pièce de théâtre,
if we had to base a play on a trial where all the witnesses were bling-bling, or, let's say, full of shiny things, we would base it on the trial of Ms. Opavska. January 2003. The trial begins in Nice. Indicted on a complicity to murder charge, she faces life in prison. The jurors will then decide her fate. But in the austere conditions of the courtroom, it's a frivolous world parading past the witness box. We were attending a show. Our focus was on luxury shopping, five-star hotels, spas, air travel, and personal fortunes. For the jurors, it was a trial of the stars. Businessmen, sports stars, or adventurers attracted by the smoke and mirrors of the jet set, all lay witness to a life where money flows freely, in exactly the same fashion as the victim Alberto Boni would offer gifts to Katharina. I see all the designer clothes, the furs, the jewelry. Let me tell you something. She tells a friend of hers she's just opened a safe at the BNP Menton full of jewelry. And suddenly, this has gotten very old. Now that's very telling. There's even a collaborator of Alberto Boni who will tell us of a precious stone valued at $100,000 acquired from an Australian. We were in another world, perhaps less noble than one might think, and more vulgar than what one might imagine. For among the witnesses, there were not just rich men, but also fiendish women. We saw two girls arrive, friends of Katharina Opavska. Call girls. It brought a lot of smiles to people's faces in the court of Versailles. Normally you would show up looking decent, but they were anything but decent. So what was Katharina Opavska's place in this world where the line between money, sex, and romance seemed so tenuous, so suspect, so ambiguous? Katharina Opavska, who is she really? The question that runs throughout the entire trial. Impossible not to ask this question. During the filming of this documentary, it's hard to break through her shell and identify who this woman really is with all of her contradictions. When we asked about her past, she opens with this. That was the flag of Czechoslovakia at the time. A book about her native country, a book of communist propaganda. It was 1962. It was a book about Slovakia's prosperity and natural resources. We are also in this book. We were considered the exemplary family. It's a nice memory. My dad, my mother, and me. I'm right there. I really like this picture. Engineer father, stay-at-home mother, summer vacations and games between sisters, the Soviet family model. Katharina Opavska recounts her life the way this book of propaganda tells the story of her homeland. She does not want to be regarded as the girl from Eastern Europe, born into poverty and desperate to make it in the West. At her trial, she is very reluctant to talk about her life as a little girl. She was born in 1955. That's 2 years after Stalin's death. I don't know if you can even imagine the state of Slovakia at the time. She's always said that her mother was German, that she considered herself German. She didn't even want to recognize that she was Slovak. She is clearly ashamed of her Slavic origins. She wants to completely break with her origins. When she comes of age, she will quickly break away from her country. She even says that she forgot her mother tongue. Childhood trauma? We may never know. Though one thing is certain, the story of Katharina Opavska is the story of a new beginning, where the story always changes. 1974, she leaves Slovakia under mysterious circumstances. We do not know who helps her move west. Regardless, she will never go back. Her journey begins in Germany, then on to France and Italy. 3 countries, 3 men, 3 lives. There is a vitality to this woman. She will pass from one man to another, from one country to another, from one situation to another, all in this logic of failure. Katharina has chosen a path that is literally breathtaking, yet her life is fraught with drama. Hans Mayr-Hofer is the first man in her life, and also her first misfortune. In 1980, just weeks after their wedding, the German insurer dies of a fever contracted in South Africa. Katharina then rebuilds her life with Volker Puller, a pharmacist from Nuremberg. With him she started a family and had a son, Philip. But again, her happiness is short-lived. In 1996, as her husband awaits sentencing, he flees and kidnaps their son Philip in the process, just as he's leaving school. He disappears and leaves no forwarding address. In 2000, her last companion, Alberto Boni, dies in tragic and mysterious circumstances a few miles from her home. It's a life filled with tragic turns. From Slovakia to Western Europe, 3 companions, 1 son, and 4 tragic endings. You could say she paid a heavy price, but not much is really known about her life. Whenever she speaks, everything is fine, and for her everything was always tranquil. Life with her parents was tranquil. Life with Boni was tranquil. So when she says things were tranquil, we really don't know what that means. And when she arrived in Nice, she had just lost her husband and her child. Yet, she said her life was tranquil. What traces remain of Katharina's past, a life punctuated by ruptures and disappearances? With all her travels and all the drama, her memories remain vividly all around her. It's been 15 years since she lost her son Philip, and her old family photos fill up her dresser. That's his fox terrier who always accompanied him in the car. Here are his little t-shirts, his small teddy bear. He was an only child, and so we spoiled him. Sometimes I thought, all the love I gave him, no one could ever take this love away. Pharmacist kidnaps son to avoid jail time. This was a time that was overwhelming for me, for my family, for the children at school. Very painful. We had some terrible moments. Difficult to imagine anything worse than for a mother to lose her child. In the courtroom, however, the prosecution sees Katharina as anything but a victim. All of these people missing, including her child, actually start to sow doubts about her character. Accusations start piling up, comparing her to a black widow or a praying mantis. The Attorney General made that claim, and it must have weighed heavily on this case. Madam, your life is surrounded by death and money. Wherever you go, there's money and there's death. And it had a damning effect on her indictment. The suspicions focus on the death of Katharina's first husband, Hans Meyerhofer, the rich German insurer. The death certificate from 1983 concludes a natural death. Hans Meyerhofer succumbed to an unknown tropical fever, contracted during their honeymoon in South Africa. But according to the Attorney General, that death is highly suspicious and highly intriguing. We start seeing people who said nothing at the time and will now be able to speak freely and perhaps recount how they think this death seems inexplicable. I distinctly remember this man found dead and surrounded by bloodstains, not necessarily a tropical fever-related death. So we'll start questioning what really happened. Katharina even inherits a large sum of money against the wishes of the deceased family. So following the disappearance of her second husband and her only child, the prosecution does not buy into this theory of a grieving mother. I am not convinced that this woman has done everything to find her child. This is a woman with a swinging single lifestyle. This child would have been a ball and chain for her. So, on August 28, 1996, just 3 months after their disappearance, under mysterious circumstances, she flies to Nice. The French Riviera is all mine, a kind of Rastignac in a skirt. She will get right back into the party scene. In search of a new man and a new social scene, Alberto Boni will wind up fitting the bill. They meet in Milan in 1997, in the dark world of luxury prostitution. I'll show you the restaurant where we dined every night with Alberto and where we met Katharina. The people who frequent this place are mainly big financiers. I even think the owner of Parmalat, the Italian dairy giant, is here right now. If you want, I can point him out to you. Alberto had been coming here for 40 years. Here there is no love, and certainly no love at first sight. Come over here. I'll show you the table. Right next to his favorite painting. I would sit there and he'd be there. This is the woman who organized the meeting between Alberto and Katharina, Thea von Nemeth, a former model of Valentino who came from Estonia. But her claim to fame was as a high-profile professional matchmaker. One evening she introduced Katharina to him and then Romina and so on, assuring him a lovely evening in pure elegance, nothing more. I met Tara just by chance on the beach. She was very friendly, and fortunately she spoke German, because I barely spoke any French. We started talking, and we went out along the Riviera several times with friends for cocktails and grilled dishes. It was really nice. At the time, Tara was 50 years old, and I had no idea what she did. How could I have known? When you meet people on the beach, that's not the kind of thing they typically discuss. There were no ulterior motives here. We were just having fun. The Estonian matchmaker. And so the German beauty of Slovak origin was introduced to the wealthy financier. It was like one of those passionate sulphurous stories coming out of the French Riviera. It was obvious that Théa meticulously set up meetings between high-end escorts and very wealthy men. Katharina would have never worked for a pimp. Her character would have never allowed her to put up with that kind of arrangement. However, there was a reason she chose the French Riviera. She was definitely in search of wealthy men. There is no smoking gun to officially implicate her in a luxury prostitution ring, but in the hearing, this thesis is instilled in everyone's minds. In the dock, Katharina Opavska rejects outright these suspicions hanging over her, and she leaps from her chair during the testimonials. She lashes out at a police officer at the hearing, asking him, "But how can you say something like that? Do you have any proof that I ever had to pay a fine? Do you have the name of a client? Do you have something about my past?" She was furious. The policeman said, "Yes, but I was never involved in any kind of prostitution, either in France, Germany, or Italy. So I have no idea why I keep getting thrown into this circle of people. It's insulting." At trial, Katharina admits to nothing. She doesn't let anything get past her. She defends herself like a lioness. Her harsh iron will is basically a reflection of her ascetic lifestyle. She doesn't drink, goes to bed early, and works out 6 to 7 hours per day. She is constantly working on her body. An impenetrable facade. Even her lawyer, Ms. Keramidas, the person closest to her during the trial, had a difficult time figuring her out. It was impossible to fully understand her, and to this day, I still don't know anything about her. At times, we thought that she was a shattered doll. Sometimes she'd come to the visiting room looking magnificent. After working out with her cellmates, she trained her cellmates how to cook light meals. She became famous in prison for that. She always told them to stay in good shape. That was the motto. Sometimes she would either come in wearing pigtails like a little girl or looking like a vamp. Behind this determined woman was a child, a shattered doll. But according to the expert report, it's primarily a case of a self-centered, narcissistic woman. And she takes it to the extreme, even in the sexual intimacy she shares with Alberto Boni. It was an asymmetrical relationship in which Boni gave lots of gifts and affection, money and caressing. She just loved to be stroked like a little kitten, but nothing sexual, just stroked like a child or a pet. She doesn't know how to give, especially when it comes to anything sexual. She is restive and stubborn and would never give herself. A real heart of stone. Who would have confirmed that? Who said this crap? Was this person ever in my bedroom? In one of my most intimate of places? I was always available, and he loved to tell the world that he was getting it 3 or 4 times a night. We were sexually drawn to each other. Why did Katharina Opavska kill Alberto Boni, the third man in her life? The goose with the golden egg, a man who showered her with money, gifts, and attention? Beyond the character of the accused, The real question of the trial lies in motive. A motive that's not so easy to bring to light. The plaintiff mentions life insurance without providing any immediate proof. The prosecution actually defends another thesis. By late 1999, there is an escalation of disputes between the couple. Katharina is about to leave Alberto. The financier can't stand the idea of letting his beauty get away. He was actually open to witnesses' testimony that we listened to. He would treat her like a thief and a whore, and he would remind her where she came. Alberto had a way of leveraging the situation in his favor. He managed Katharina's financial assets that she had accumulated following the death of her first husband. According to witnesses called to testify 1 week before the murder during yet another dispute, Alberto supposedly used this argument to threaten her. Alberto Boni says to Katharina Opavska, "I'm on the side of the handle and you are on the side of the blade." He had this metaphor to say, I set the rules, I hold the cards, and I could ruin you. You have no choice in the matter. By that point, she becomes very worried. Him taking everything from her is like taking away her entire lifeline, and so she will react with the speed and ferocity of an animal. Yes, we had minor arguments, but most of our arguments were related to his drinking. Katharina insists that the object of their disputes is only related to her future husband's excessive drinking. For her, there was no question of breaking up, and money was even less of an issue. However, the Attorney General's version of the story is supported by a small piece of paper found among Katharina's things in Milan. It reads in Italian the words threat, pressure, irrevocable gift, and a mysterious phone number that leads investigators to Peter Gutt, a Swiss businessman that Katharina met at the Monte Carlo thermal baths a few weeks earlier. He met this woman who said she lived with a man who was pressuring her and required the help of this man. He said that he simply suggested hiring a lawyer. We assume that irrevocable gift is what she would be seeking to obtain from Alberto Boni. She no longer wanted to have a financial threat looming over her, especially in relation to all he had given her up until now. We did an investigation to see if there was any kind of document or mandate at the bank that would have confirmed her fears, but it was not the case. Could he have ruined her? Impossible. The Attorney General said he certainly could have taken back certain things. Yes, it's true. He could have taken the house away from her. But do you really kill someone just because they threaten to take his gifts back? Did Alberto sufficiently frighten Katharina for her to believe his threats? Did she really think that the businessman would never deprive himself of anything, had the power to take back all of the jewelry and the furs and squander all her money? Was she afraid of losing everything? Did she panic to the point of ordering a murder? The one smoking gun in the trial, the evidence that incriminates Katharina, are the drugs ingested by Alberto. Temesta and noctamide, found at toxic levels in his stomach during the autopsy, would have made him unable to conduct any business. According to the toxicology report, Katharina is the only person who could have forced the banker to take these drugs. There was such a concentration that he could not have taken these drugs more than 1 or 2 hours before. The only time this man could have taken or could have been administered these drugs was when he was with Katharina Opavska. We analyzed the bottles, everything. Nothing, no drugs were found. We could have investigated the local pharmacists in Roquebrune, but we decided not to investigate. We identified her as the culprit. She was the perfect culprit. Katharina, the perfect culprit. The only one that brought something to the trial. Notably absent, in fact, were these two men. The thugs who did all the handiwork and then disappeared into the night, never leaving a trace. Who are they? On this point, the police investigation came up empty-handed. But at the trial, a new twist. A paper presented by the defense that would suggest that these two men were part of the Slavic mafia. This is the document. The wiretaps were conducted by the police in an entirely different matter. A telephone conversation between a mechanic from Marseille and a friend, strangely evoking the story of Katharina Opavska and the murder of Alberto Boni. Did I tell you what happened to a friend of mine? No. He's Swiss-Italian, a big industrial guy from Milan. This guy, 2 or 3 years ago, he introduces his new girlfriend, a really nice German girl. The guy buys her a luxury apartment in Roquebrune, jewelry, fur paintings. He's totally in love with her. And then this pimp from Russia shows up. He's the one who sent her to Germany, then from Germany to France, and finally Monaco. No. And then the pimp tells my friend, "You live with my girl, you gotta fork it out." And so the old guy pays up to be left alone. And then one day they came and beat him to death. They also tossed a Molotov cocktail and burned up everything. So the guy died? Yes, the trial is next week.
Cette fille a peut-être été lapin, peut-être, mais l'objet, la
This
victime
woman
elle-même,
might have actually been the victim herself of shady characters that were even more dangerous, more sophisticated, and more wicked than she. People who might have taken advantage of her beauty, her money, and there was nothing she could say or do about it, for denouncing them would be even more dangerous than being accused of a murder that she did not commit. But then the mechanic tells the police that he found this information in the local press, and he added a little drama to the story to impress the person he was talking to. So the lead ends there. We might never know who those two men were who set fire to Alberto's car that night. Simple thugs, accomplices, or mafia people. Katharina said she does not remember anything after leaving the scene. Not even how she walked 10 kilometers back home late at night, barefoot, all alone. Despite the unanswered questions in this story, as in many other criminal cases, the fate of Katharina Opavska is determined by just one thing, the firm belief of the jurors. And we will never know exactly which story prevailed among the jury. The jury will find Katharina guilty on 2 counts of ordering the murder of Alberto Boni. You could say that Katharina Opavska's coldness and apparent aloofness was the smoking gun that got her convicted. In all my career, I have never had a trial that left such a taste of unfinished business. It was a trial riddled with shadows, obscuring the real truth. Verdict on appeal, 15 years in prison for the murder of Alberto Boni. Maybe it was to stop the spiral of deaths and disappearances linked to Katharina. The following chapter had already been planned. It was New York. When Thea von Nemety learned that she was in prison, she was dumbstruck. But how is it that she's not in New York? Everyone was convinced that she had broken it off with Alberto Boni and that she had started a new life in New York. She had already planned on her fourth or fifth life beyond the Riviera. If we are in this process of repetition, it would mean that the next one in line will also die before her, maybe due to an accident, illness, heart attack, and so on. Released in February 2010, Katharina Opavska has today gone back to the Riviera. She returned to live in Roquebrune, in the house Alberto Boni bought for her. At 56, her years in prison have not seemed to mark her. Yet she is no longer quite the same. In 2008, while she was incarcerated in the north of France, an event would change her life forever. When the door opened, I saw my baby, 6'2". I was so happy you cannot imagine the joy. Trapped in the world of contradictions, Katharina Opavska would have at least told the truth about one thing. Her kidnapped son Philip really wasn't dead. There he was in the visiting room. You know, after all these years, I did not know if he was even alive. And now I saw him in all his greatness. So we hugged and shared a tender moment. Philip is 24 years old today, and his father still at large.